June the 4th, 2020. Guys, we're starting to finally get some images of Comet Atlas as it dives between Mercury and the Sun. Check this out. Now, this started back on May the 27th, and I've got images up past this one as it goes deeper. But what happens, we're looking at a satellite in space that's in the same orbit of Earth, but on a different corner of the Sun. And it takes a couple of days for these images to get back to the planet and then be processed. So there's a delay in that. But this is, the Sun is to the left, and you can see the energy that's involved. And also you can see Mercury as is really catching a lot of light reflection from the Sun. It's probably pretty warm also, but it's an electric universe. And now we're going, this is May 31st. We'll go into June. You can see as it dives, and then again Mercury moving across the top there. When this happens, and I've said it many times, and when we first started watching these comets, that these electrical discharges, or the arcs between the comets and the Sun, affect our planet. And now we're going into June the 1st. You see that at the bottom. These are the latest ones we have, but you can see that complete dive, and then a clearer image of Mercury there. It's amazing to me that we have satellites like this. And this would be, if you could imagine it, if you were following Earth in its orbit and you were looking out the window of your craft, this is what you would see. Again, the Sun to the left, Mercury moving from left to right. Now, Stereo A is what we were just watching, and it's located in Earth's orbit behind Earth. And so it's looking just to the right of the Sun so it doesn't get the glare, and you're seeing Mercury there. Now, the Comet Atlas is not in here. Now, that comet is not marked as Atlas, but it was the only one that matched this sun dive between the Sun and Mercury. Looking at it on the JPL, May 31st was the close approach of Atlas to our Sun. Then it starts this dive that you're seeing here. It's amazing, but I have to pull it around a little to the left to give you the images if you were looking from Stereo A, the satellite that's behind Earth in orbit. You've got Venus there. You've got Y4 here, or Atlas, and to the left in the pink ring is Mercury. And as we move to the left, where Stereo A is in this blue Earth orbit, you can see how that would work out. But guys, what's amazing is to be able to get these images. So as I spin this around, again, you can see the angle of the sun diving Comet Atlas, or not sun diver, but the Comet Atlas that's diving between us and the Sun. Now, what happens, look at May 31st timestamp. We had a coronal mass ejection, leave the Sun from that side. And what happens when you have two bursts of energy? When a coronal mass ejection happens, the speed of light, you have one pulse. And then as you see this traveling coronal mass ejection, which passed the Earth on the third, you have the second pulse of energy. And the quakes have been very active during this period of time. Again, Earth is in the yellow dot. You've got Mercury in the orange, Venus in the green. And when the red section, or the red square, is the satellite Stereo A. Now, what has happened? Going back to yesterday, 6.8 San Pedro. This is down in South America. 6.8 in Peru. 5.6 again South America. But we felt it here also in the United States. Today we had a strong 5.5 in California. 6.4 in Indonesia. And the Earth, especially during grand solar minimum, feels these impacts. In other words, you had an initial burst, photon burst, speed of light. Shields felt that. We started feeling these on the 31st. And then even today, we're one day past the wave passing our planet of the coronal mass ejection, or CME, and it's still reverberating. Now, what happened? This plague, this is not a sunspot at the top, but in the bottom right there, that is a sunspot, and it's important to know where it's at, because what happened with the top section you see is no longer a sunspot. It is called a plague, and the sunspot diminished right after the coronal mass ejection. but we're in a new solar cycle. We're in the beginning of the uptick, and they can tell by these sunspots because they're opposite polarity. Every 11.8 years or so, the sun changes its polarity, and you can tell it by the sunspots. You'll have a minus plus, and so in the last cycle, 24 for instance, and then in this cycle you'll have a plus minus. These dark areas are coronal openings in the sun's atmosphere, and a lot of solar wind is pumping out of those. We'll have to watch it, but you can see the energy here. Watch this sunspot that's coming around will be Earth facing. Guys, you could put a handful of the planet that we live on inside that spot, but you can see the again, magnetic lines of force that are looping the energy back to the surface of the sun, and sometimes you'll get an explosion that is so hard and so fast that even the gravity of the sun can't pull it back in. What's important about the sunspot, say you draw a line across the equator of the sun, the Earth's ecliptic is not there. It is below that. We're a little south of the center, or the equator of the sun. So these lower side sunspots have more effect on us as they turn. You also have a coronal opening in the bottom, and there's some weak points right in the center. Again, the dark spots are an opening in the magnetic field of the sun. Normally, these magnetic lines will capture the energy from the sun and feed it back to the surface, but when you have the black areas, that energy is released into the inner solar system. But guys, it's very interesting, and we're finally getting some great shots. Even though Stereo A, the satellite that we saw the comet on, is well past its lifetime and has been blasted by many solar flares, it's amazing it's still there. But even with the grainy images, it was very clear what we were seeing. And even though Comet Atlas is probably 30 pieces and they're tracking 6 of them, it was still holding together in that image. As far as the distance, you could still see how bright it was compared to some of the other comets. But guys, these are the things that are really interesting to me. And a little later tonight, after the 8 or 9 p.m. update on tropical depression crystal ball, if it's doing anything major, I'll come in and let you know. And it is tracking just a little further to the west, a little closer to the Louisiana-Texas line than it was. But it still looks like, between the Canadian model and the NavGem Navy model, that it's going to travel somewhere along that Mississippi River, guys. But we'll update it. We're watching it. You watch it. It's a heads up. Be safe.